Good afternoon, students. In our last class, we completed Dalit, its meaning and definition. Today, we are going to see our next concept in our first module of Dalit movements in India, 1900 to 1947. The next concept is the various approaches regarding the concept of Dalit. Various approaches, you already aware that when you are studying Indian history, already covered that various approaches among the Indian historiography, which are from the utilitarian school of historiography to up to the subaltern school of historiography. Likewise, likewise, when you see the Dalit studies, while studying the Dalit studies are about the study of term Dalit, you also covers the various schools of historiography. Okay, so here historiography means it's a study of writing history. Okay, historiography formally examine the writing of history, the use of historical methods, drawing upon authorship, sources, interpretation, style, bias, and the reader. Moreover, historiography also denotes a body of historical work. Scholars discuss historiography topically, like the historiography of Catholicism, the historiography of India, the historiography of China, etc. The approaches include oral history and social history. Okay, so beginning in the 19th century, at the ascent of academic history, a corpus of historiography or historiographic literature developed, including What is History, which is written by E.H. Carr, and Meta History by Hayden White. So these are important authors, or the scholars, or the historians who wrote about the historiography. Historiography is nothing but a writing of a history or study of writing of the history. So here, when you see the writings of Dalit or Dalit quotient, you also follows the various historiographies, schools of historiographies. Here also you see the utilitarian school of historiography, imperialist school of historiography, nationalist school of historiography, and the Marxist school of historiography, and subaltern school of historiography. Okay, these are 4 to 5 schools you find. Among this, subaltern school is clearly fit for study of Dalit history, basically. Okay, so utilitarian school is a school includes the various historians, basically from the European territories or European nations. So among them, you all aware that like Max Muller, V.S. Smith, many other Sir William Jones, these are the important historians comes under the utilitarian school of history. These are the historians who reconstructed the Indian history initially. And next one is the imperialist school, which is also comprised of various European historians who criticized the history written by or given by the utilitarian school, and they followed only the European or a colonial form of historiography, and who criticized all other historians, all other schools, basically. And you see various nationalist historians among the National School of Historiography. Among them, the many noted historians you are aware, like the H.C. Rai Chaudhary and R.S. Sharma, many other historians you find, particularly from Nationalist School. And among the Nationalist School, they only confined to a certain things, particularly which related to the upper section of the Indian society. So, Nationalist School of Historiography only gives about the interests of the upper section of the Indian society, and whereas the upper class ideology you find within the National School of Historiography. They never gives about the lower class aspects or the things regarding the lower class in the Indian class structure. And within the National School of Historians, there is a division we find, a important division, and nothing but the Marxist School of Historiography or the Marxist School of Historians. These are the group mainly who studied at various universities at abroad, and they followed various rationalistic thinking, and on the basis of the rationalistic thinking they started writing or questioning the nationalist school who are neglected the the history of the lower class. And basically the Marxist school of historians who concentrated on the Marxist views, which basically given by the theories of the Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And and the historiography which is given by a section from the Marxist school called as the subaltern school of historians. The subaltern history was conceived as an alternative to all existing historiographies, dismissing all of them as elitist in character. The subaltern history set out to recover the voice of the subaltern, a social group identified as representing the demographic difference between the total Indian population and all those who are described as the elite. The people's history, the history of the oppressed or the suppressed or the exploited, was nothing new in Indian historiography. The concern of the Marxist historians has been precisely that what could have distinguished the subaltern history from the earlier genres of the people's history was a qualitative change in its methodology by giving in a history from below. This, however, was not to be, as most of the essays collected collected in the series failed to recover the voice of the marginalized by using unconventional sources drawn from the Indian languages. In fact, two major marginalized groups in Indian society, the Dalits and the women, hardly appeared in these studies. Moreover, despite the inspiration from the writings of Antonio Gramsci, the Italian uh, Marxist, uh, Marxist historian, the entire project lacked theoretical coherence and conceptual precision. It is therefore not surprising that project soon took a linguistic turn and lost much of its radical rhetoric. When you see the emergence of alternative historiography, today we stand particularly before the challenge of redefining both nationalism and historiography in relation to marginal peoples and groups. The question they raise is whose nation, whose history. To be able to come to terms with these questions, we need to migrate to another level of experience in historiography, which has great potential for rendering unity and peace. A positive trend in Indian historiography is emergence of Dalit and women history. The former contests the social power of upper caste and the later the patriarchal authority of male. The Indian historiography, whichever genre it belongs to, have been silent, either consciously or unconsciously, about the history of these groups. Ranjit Guha, in his introduction to the subaltern studies, has stated that history of Indian nationalism has been written up as a sort of spiritual biography of the Indian elite. In fact, the entire history of India has been written as the saga of upper caste and the male heroes. The history of Indian Renaissance, for instance, has been encapsulated in the socio-religious efforts of upper caste leaders from Raja Ram Mohan Rai to Dayanand Saraswati. For a long time, people like Jyotiba Phule, Jyotiba Phule and Narayan Guru and Ramasamy Nayakar did not figure at all. Pandit Ramabai and Tarabai Shinde are still not included. This is true of the national movement as well. Ambedkar has only begun to be noticed thanks to the attempts to recover the role of Dalits in order to gain their rightful place in the national life. Okay, when you see the contributions of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to an alternative Dalit history. Are you hearing my voice, students? Are you hearing my voice clearly? Okay, right. So nice. Now we are going to see the contribution of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to an alternative Dalit historiography. Okay, so Ambedkar's contributions are not only significant in writings Indian history, but in evolving a method which is more relevant even a contemporary historians of different schools. Ambedkar came to forefront in Indian academics from the decade of 19th with the intensified struggles of Dalit. The struggles of ordinary people forced the centers of power and knowledge to consider the importance of Ambedkar and his ideas in social reconstruction of the nation. With Ambedkar as a source of inspiration, Dalits are struggling to write their own history by interrogating the dominant Brahminical traditions. The relevance of Ambedkar has to be read with the 50 years of developments of post-Ambedkar or post-independent India. His approach to Indian society and its history are crucial in understanding contemporary and the struggles of the oppressed. Okay, so when you see the rationality, moral, and community as principle of Dalit historiography, Ambedkar's notion of history is identified with the moral community, imbibed with the principles of equality, liberty, and fraternity. His historical method borrows tools from Marxism in understanding the ancient history. Rather than mechanically applying Marxism, he had creatively used it in keeping the specific context of Indian society. He approached Indian society from the point of religion and finds the religion as source for the different ideological position. For instance, Buddhism is considered as revolutionary and Hinduism as counter revolutionary. Rationality is the guiding principle in evaluating the principles and practice of religion. For the claims of religion, he applied a rationalistic principle. He brings the religion as a focal point in reference to caste system. To construct the Indian history in a proper perspective, he availed all the convincing ideas of his times, from liberal to Marxist. This may go in tune of pragmatism, especially which given by Jan Devi. Okay, so we need not go for the pragmatism is here, because which is a different pragmatism of Indian context. Okay, so the pragmatism of Ambedkar differs from the context of Western societies. Okay, there is a much difference between the society of Western nations and India. Okay, so the pragmatic method of Ambedkar came out of his social responsibility and in presenting the history from the victim's point of view. Okay, so Ambedkar, which observed the history from the victim's point of view. Okay, it is from the Dalit side. Okay, in essence, he made a serious attempt in constructing the Indian history in which one finds dignified place for Sudras and untouchable communities. Ambedkar is a source of inspiration for contemporary Dalit movement, and so far constructing history from Dalit point of view. Okay, Dalit historiography established its own method by challenging the colonial, nationalist, Marxist, and subaltern approaches of Indian historiography. Okay, so no school of Indian historiography highlighted the lower class history. Only the subaltern group is the only group of historians who highlighted the lower class history, particularly among the Indian history. Okay, so when you see the historiographical relevance of the caste and religion, so Ambedkar appears very much aware of both the historian's social affinity, especially the caste in dealing with the material in relation to the problems of socialist. In an introduction to Who Are the Sudras, he made this point more clear. Ambedkar is the first thinker who systemized the conception of caste in analytical way. all the human activities are determined by the caste. Caste has social, political, and economical implications. In truth, caste is the primary institution of Indian society, and other institutions like family, state, nation, school are directly or indirectly related to. So Ambedkar had more focus on philosophy of religion in understanding the socio-political phenomena and moral basis of Indian society, then exclusively depending on either religion or philosophy. He developed it as a method. It seems in evolving this method, he got influenced by John Dewey. Okay, John Dewey's pragmatism is different with the pragmatism given by Ambedkar.